and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the last voyage of the Demeter. Before we jump into this, spoilers. There are going to be spoilers because I don't know that I can talk about this one without spoiling things. My level of disappointment on this one is so high that I'm like, I just need to get out all of my aggravation, and spoilers is the only way I know how to do that. So if you are interested in seeing this movie, skip this review, come back to it after you've watched it, see if you agree with me on some of these points. So right out of the gate, I have to just immediately say Dracula is one of my all-time favorite characters. Like, I remember reading Bram Stoker's Dracula when I was a kid. I have loved probably the majority of the movies that they have made about Dracula or about the character, you know, from Nosferatu all the way up. Bram Stoker's Dracula is probably my favorite rendition, the one with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder and like Gary Oldman. That one to me is just, you know, brilliant. It's like chef's kiss brilliant. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but for some reason, that version, like Bram Stoker's Dracula with Keanu Reeves, was the version that I was like, oh, maybe the last voyage of the Demeter is going to like kind of be related to that movie in some way. Don't ask me why I thought that, but I just did. Like, that is the one that just pops into my head the most. So I was like, yay, last voyage of the Demeter. In my mind, I was picturing something along the lines of Rogue One, maybe, you know, where with Rogue One, I get that Dracula is not related to Star Wars, but stay with me on this one. Like, with Rogue One, you knew with that story, there wasn't going to be anybody that came out the other side, right? We already knew that this was like a doomed mission, but that they like completed the mission and something good comes out of it. And with the Demeter, you already know, you know, this is a doomed voyage, right? We already kind of know how it goes. But for some reason, I was expecting still the same level of quality out of this movie as what came out of Rogue One. Like, Rogue One is something that I very much enjoyed. And even though you kind of knew the story and knew how it was going to end, I was still invested enough in those characters to not be like bored out of my mind the entire way through, thinking like, well, what's the point, right? Last Voyage of the Demeter, though, did not have what Rogue One had. Like, I was shocked, by the way, when I got home to see the cast list for Last Voyage of the Demeter. For one, no clue. I had no clue that there was actually an actor cast as Dracula, because 10 out of 10, if somebody had asked me, I would have been like, no, it's entirely CGI. It's not a person, because it doesn't ever in any way, shape, or form look like an actual actor, like in a suit at all. It kind of reminded me of like Gollum, right? Where it's just CGI, but maybe like an actor did stuff, and maybe that's the way that they did it with this one, but I don't know. Like, maybe he's just, the voice did the weird noise, who knows. And then what really surprised me is Rosie Perez is listed among the cast, and I absolutely do not remember her being in this movie at all. And when I am doing this review, I'm literally reviewing it like an hour after having gotten home from the theater. So like fresh in my mind. And I absolutely do not remember her being in it. So I don't know if maybe she was in it in some way, shape, or form and I missed it. Maybe I blacked out, or maybe they cut her out, because what her character name is not listed. So I don't know if potentially she was cast and then whatever it was that she did, they cut it out, or who knows. But I've never in my life like started out in a movie that I can remember, like started out in a movie just stoked, right? Stoked to see what they were going to do here. And then just gradually got more and more disappointed as the movie went on. Like, typically within the first, I don't know, half hour of a film, I'm like, this is either going to be great or this is going to be garbage. But never have I gone through it being like, wait, what? Like, it almost to me seemed as though whoever was writing this movie script, like the screenplay for it, just thinks that the entire audience is real stupid, because there is no logic or reason behind most anything that happened. It's like, it's one of those movies that you would be screaming at the television screen for, being like, how are you this dumb? Clearly he's in this particular space, or why are you doing that? That is the dumbest thing ever. Like, and it kind of reminds me of the old horror movies from like the 80s or whatever that they made fun of in Scream, you know, for instance, where she's like, there's always a noise and then they're always running up the stairs instead of out the front door, and it's insulting. It's like that, where literally there would be a noise and then somebody would be like, hello, and have to go check and see. And it's like, how many of you have to die before you stop doing that? Like, it's just, I don't get it. And there literally is like, I think there's like, you know, Dracula had all of the like boxes of dirt because he has to sleep in dirt from his homeland, right? And it's like 50 boxes of dirt. One out of those 50 has these like super fancy emblems all over it. And then when you know, he's attacking people and killing people, every single person on that boat is like, gosh, I don't know what box he's in. Oh, gee, maybe the one with the giant dragon emblem on it. Maybe that one. Like, how are you this moronic? It doesn't make sense. And of course, you know, they brought in some characters that are not located in the story anywhere. And that would be the woman that is found on the boat. And then the character of Clemens, which is the only not white person in the movie, you know. And I liked Clemens. I liked his character. He was like a physician or a doctor that was just looking for travel back to London, right? And you kind of figure out how he ended up sort of in Europe in the first place, kind of towards the end. It didn't quite make sense, but you're like, okay, I could probably buy it. But the girl's character doesn't make sense at all. Like, at all. She's supposed to be a Romanian woman that was packaged up in one of the boxes to go with Dracula on this voyage so that he would have essentially one of his own people to feed on in the boat, like while they were going, which again doesn't make sense because he's feeding on her a little bit at a time for every day that they're going. But then when they find her, like when the rest of the crew finds her on accident, he just starts murdering everyone viciously. So it's like, but why? Like, if you had one person that you anticipated carrying you the whole voyage, which is a considerable one. We're talking about the 1800s, right? The late 1800s. It would be a considerable journey. It's not going to be like a week, you know? If you had one person, then why on earth would you just start massacring everyone? Like, it just, wouldn't you ration? And she talks about him rationing sort of later, but wouldn't you like ration in the first place? Whatever. Like, there are so many points in the story that don't make sense. And above and beyond points in the story that don't make sense, it's boring. It's so boring. Like, I've never been bored during a Dracula movie, I don't think, ever. Like, especially not one that I feel like was geared more towards being like actual horror and like an actual thriller. I want to say this one is like rated R. I might be wrong on that one, but like I was expecting something a little bit more substantial. Like I was expecting, you know, jump scares. I was expecting blood, obviously. And yes, there is a lot of blood, but it's like, it's almost like 80s version blood, you know, like the early movies where you're like, it's not scary. But I get that if I was a kid, you know, in the 80s, if you were a kid watching Jaws or something, clearly that would have been scary because we hadn't gone through all of the like CGI monsters and all of that kind of stuff. Like I was expecting sort of like Alien maybe, or Aliens, that whole franchise, like that level of sort of fear. of not knowing where this creature was, knowing that it's somewhere on board, and like being terrified, but it wasn't. And I enjoyed sort of the creature creation, like the look of him, but I still anticipated to sort of see Dracula at some point. Like I expected him to kind of bounce between, I don't know, maybe the actual Dracula human being man person and then sort of different forms, i.e. the sort of werewolfy wolf form, the kind of a bat-like thing that we did see in obviously the trailers and stuff. But he is in the same exact form the entire way through. And something about that just, it lost its like luster, so to speak, as the movie went on. And this movie is not a particularly long one. Like I think it was maybe just under 2 hours. So a very quick sort of film. And I was not entertained. Like I wasn't hyped about it by the time it was over. I was ready to go home by the time this one was over. And a couple of other people that were in the audience had mentioned, like I was chatting with a couple of people as we were like walking out of the theater, mentioned the same, that they were like, wow, I almost fell asleep during that. And I felt very similar. Like right next to me in the 2 seats, like there was a space between, but then 2 seats next to me, there was like an 8-year-old, maybe like a 10-year-old. Not a single time were these kids scared, phased, nothing like that. They were just munching away on their snacks, like watching this movie. And for one, awesome. Like for whoever are their parents, like clearly you're letting them watch movies of some substance, that like this one was one that they were hyped to go see, right? As like a family film. But at the same time, I sort of was expecting them to be, they're not very young. It's not like they were 5 or something like that. But I still was sort of expecting maybe the blood to bother them or some of the jump scares to bother them. Nada. Like nothing fazed these 2 kids. And that to me speaks volumes. So I don't know. This one was not a win for me. It was incredibly disappointing. It was incredibly predictable, especially the very ending was so predictable. There were so many moments where I was just like, the answer to all of your questions is right in front of your faces and every single character is missing it. And it's frustrating me at this point. like by an hour in, I was like, y'all are dumb. And if you expect me to be this dumb, like it's sad. I'm saddened by it. But yeah, I'm so disappointed because Dracula is one of my all-time favorite characters. And I was so stoked for this one to be a genuinely like good sort of thriller movie about the journey on the Demeter, to England. And nope. Nope. I am genuinely surprised that there are some people out there that are giving this like 10 out of 10 on IMDb's ratings. And I'm like, how is that? What? Very easily entertained, clearly. But for me, this one was not a win. I think absolutely wait until it comes out on streaming. I don't think it's worth going to see in the theaters unless you just really want to go to the movies and be eating snacks. Maybe bring snacks, definitely. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the last voyage of the Demeter. I would love to know what you guys think if you go watch this one. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.